It echoed across a crowded cafe full of muted laptop clicks and milk frothers hissing. Her laugh broke through, loud, sharp, unfiltered. The kind of laugh you only let out when you're not worried who hears it. I hadn't heard it in weeks. Not at dinner. Not during movie nights. Not even during that forced trip to the farmer's market where she smiled at every vendor but barely looked at me. But there it was now, that familiar, somewhat laugh, and it wasn't mine anymore. She was 3 tables away. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had taken a different walking route after therapy. A new one. My phone had died, so I couldn't call a ride. So I walked. So I passed by. So I stopped. So I saw. Her head tilted back. Eyes crinkled. One hand on a paper cup, the other playfully pushing the arm of the man across from her. He wore a gray Henley, sleeves rolled, like every guy in a self-help podcast cover. Confident. Relaxed. He wasn't trying too hard, which meant he was trying very hard. They weren't coworkers. I know how she looks at coworkers. I've seen her with them, during Zoom calls, holiday parties, when I picked her up after work and waited in the corner like a forgotten coat. This wasn't that. She looked hungry, like she was finally being seen in color after living in grayscale. Meanwhile, I stood behind a potted plant in the window, holding a half-eaten granola bar, heart pacing like I'd just sprinted 5 blocks. I hadn't. I'd just stumbled on the wreckage of my marriage in broad daylight. The man leaned in. She didn't lean away. I stayed too long. Long enough for her to glance toward the glass. Our eyes met. Her face froze. Only for a second, but enough to confirm everything I needed to know. She looked guilty. Not surprised. Guilty. And then she smiled. Not at me. At him. And I left. Walked home without feeling my legs. The sidewalk could have opened up and swallowed me, and I'd have welcomed it. That night, she came home with a bottle of wine. My favorite one. The one she forgot last Valentine's Day. Long day, she said, placing her bag down, lips already half-curled in a story. You wouldn't believe the drama at work. No mention of coffee. No mention of him. I didn't ask. Instead, I washed the dishes we didn't use and said, yeah, work's wild. She fell asleep on the couch. I watched her breathe, and I realized something I wasn't ready to admit yet. She had already left me. Her body just hadn't moved out. She didn't bring up seeing me at the cafe. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not ever. That silence became a character in our home. Sitting at the dinner table with us, climbing into bed between us, watching as I folded laundry that didn't even smell like her anymore. You can tell when someone changes their perfume without telling you. It's a strange betrayal, isn't it? Not because they owe you a fragrance update, but because you weren't worth the memory. I started noticing her phone habits morph like fog into walls. Screen always tilted away, brightness turned low. She used to leave it around all the time, when we trusted each other, I guess. Back then, her passcode was my birthday. Now, it was one of those long ones, like a locker combination. The kind people use when they really don't want to be interrupted. I asked once, casually, while reaching for the charger. You changed your passcode? She shrugged. Work required it. Work. Her new all-purpose alibi. And me? I didn't confront her. I Googled how to tell if your wife is emotionally cheating, like a teenager trying to decode signals. I read articles at 3 a.m. with the brightness turned down, sitting on the toilet seat with the lid closed so she wouldn't hear the creak of the hallway floorboards. I became a detective without credentials. Tracking smiles, timestamps, the way her tone lifted when she said his name. Ezra. Yeah, I learned it. Not because she told me. Because I overheard her say it while FaceTiming in the bedroom, the door half shut. She said his name the way you say the name of a person you want to impress. Not the way you say Gary from finance. That week, I started documenting everything in a Notes app folder labeled Household Warranty Info, like I was building a case file for a trial that would never happen. October 12th. She came home at 9:37 p.m. Said she had drinks with the team. Smelled like sandalwood and cinnamon, not her usual. Lipstick smudged. Didn't take off her earrings until she went to bed. October 15th. Said she was working late. Find My iPhone pinged her 3 blocks away from the office. Restaurant. Wine bar. Reviewed on Yelp as intimate and perfect for a first date. October 19th. Caught her humming in the kitchen. Same melody she used to hum when we were first dating. She stopped when she saw me listening. Didn't say anything. Just smiled like I was the neighbor's dog begging for a treat. I had enough signs to build a road. And yet, I stayed quiet. Why? Because I wasn't ready to hear her confirm it. I wasn't ready to hear her say that everything I'd invested in, sacrificed for, cared about, chose daily, was just an emotional placeholder until someone more exciting pulled up a chair across from her at a coffee shop. But the worst part? I think she was waiting for me to explode, to accuse her, to give her a reason to say I was the problem. And I wouldn't give her that. Instead, I became softer, nicer. I made her lunch twice that week, with little notes like I used to. She didn't even mention them. Just tossed the containers in the sink without even opening the baggie with the cookie. The cookie I baked from scratch. The one she used to call my favorite little guilty pleasure. She didn't even touch it. And that's when I knew someone else was giving her something sweeter. It was a Thursday when she told me she'd be late again. Same text as before, short, vague, efficient, running behind. Don't wait up. Love you. There was no punctuation at the end. She always used to sign off with a period or a heart. That night, just words. Cold. Informational. Something you send a coworker, not a husband. I didn't text back. I just stared at the screen. I read the message maybe 20 times, waiting for it to change. Waiting for the universe to glitch and say, just kidding. She's planning a surprise for you. She still loves you. She still remembers who you are. But all it said was that she wouldn't be home. Again. She didn't know I'd already found the key. It was in her coat pocket. Not the coat she wears to work, the one she takes to yoga on Sundays. She'd been forgetting it on the hook near the door lately, something she never used to do. Maybe that was her way of slipping. Maybe she wanted to get caught and just didn't want to be the one to say it out loud. The key was silver. Flat. No engraving. But I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't a key to our place. Our building uses cards, not keys. The only other key she'd ever had was to her childhood home, and she hadn't spoken to her father since 2019. So I did what any unraveling man with too much time and too much love would do. I followed her. I waited until Sunday. She left at 10:12 a.m., wearing leggings, no makeup, hair in a messy bun. The exact uniform she wore when she used to go to real yoga. Only this time, she didn't go east toward the studio. She walked west. And then she called a car. Not a rideshare. A cab. Old school. Untraceable. But I had already left ahead of her. I was on foot, hoodie up, pretending to read the paper on a park bench near the corner. I caught the license plate, snapped a blurry photo, and followed. She got dropped off outside a residential building in a quiet neighborhood I didn't recognize. One of those new places with fake balconies and clean concrete stairs that look like they've never been walked on. She used the key. Didn't even look around. Just buzzed herself in and disappeared inside like it was routine. Like she belonged there. I didn't follow her inside. I didn't need to. I had confirmation. I had pain. But what I did next? I'm not proud of it. I waited. 2 hours. Maybe more. She didn't come out. When I finally left, I was soaked. It had started raining somewhere in the middle of my spiraling, but I hadn't even noticed. At home, I didn't confront her. Again, I didn't scream. Didn't rage. I asked, "How was yoga?" And she said, without blinking, without breathing wrong, "Good. We had a sub today. Kinda boring, actually." Lie number 2. She said it so smoothly, I almost believed I was the liar. That's the terrifying part about slow betrayal. It makes you question your own reality. You start to wonder if you're the one being unfair. If you're being paranoid. If you are the villain in the story you thought you were the hero of. But I knew I wasn't. Not when she started calling me babe again. Not sweetheart. Not honey. Just babe. Soft. Generic. Detached. Like someone trying to reattach themselves to a person they'd already left behind in every other way but legal. The next week, she invited me to a dinner with her coworkers. It was the first time in months she wanted me anywhere near that side of her life. I thought maybe it was progress. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she was trying. I wore a shirt she bought me 2 birthdays ago. The one she said made me look like a man who gets things done. I practiced my smile in the mirror before we left. And then, in the elevator ride down, she dropped it. Just like that. By the way, if Ezra's there, don't be weird. I didn't even have time to reply before the doors opened. The restaurant was one of those places with dim lighting and overpriced appetizers that look like abstract art. Dana loved it. I always thought it felt like dining inside a jewelry box. Too polished, too delicate, too designed for people who pretend they don't Google the menu beforehand. We were early. She wanted to get a good spot. I knew what that meant. She wanted to control the angles. Who sat where? Who saw what? Dana was strategic like that. She always said she hated drama, but in reality, she hated mess. Big difference. We got seated at a long table tucked into a side alcove, just enough light overhead to make you feel like you were being watched by a chandelier. She took the seat facing the door. I sat beside her, awkward, like the intern at a birthday party he wasn't really invited to. 10 minutes in, they started arriving. Colleagues, designers, copy people, a creative director who wore sunglasses indoors and hugged Dana too long. I shook hands, smiled, played my role. The supportive husband with the patient eyes and tired smile. Then he walked in. Ezra. He was shorter than I expected. Thinner too. But the way he walked, like he knew people noticed him and he didn't mind. He wore a jacket over a turtleneck, the kind of outfit you wear when you want to seem effortless, but spent 20 minutes deciding on. When Dana saw him, something in her spine straightened. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. But she adjusted. Sat up taller. Pulled her sleeves down. Bit the inside of her cheek like a teenager trying not to show she was excited. He saw us, came over, and greeted her first. Not me. Not the table. Her. Hey, you made it, he said, like they'd spoken 5 minutes earlier. She nodded. Of course. Then she remembered I existed. Ezra, this is my husband, Lester. He extended his hand to me like a politician who already knew he'd won. His grip was soft, calculated. Great to meet you, man. I've heard. Stuff. Not so much about you. Just stuff. Likewise, I said, though I hadn't heard a single positive word about him. Only silence. And silence says more than most people realize. He sat 2 seats down, diagonal from her. Close enough to lock eyes if needed. Far enough to deny intention. Dinner was a blur of forced laughs and trendy cocktails. They talked about campaigns and brainstorming sessions, late nights at the office that sounded suspiciously like dates in disguise. Someone brought up a pitch meeting that had gone sideways, and Dana laughed harder than I'd heard in months. Not at the story, but at Ezra's version of it. And that's when I realized I was sitting at a table full of people who knew. Maybe not the details, but they knew. You can always tell when a group has silently agreed to pretend something isn't happening. The way they glanced at me, the brief pauses before using her name and his in the same sentence, the subtle way no one asked how we met. Because they didn't need to. Because I wasn't part of the real story anymore. I excused myself halfway through dessert. Said I had a headache. She didn't offer to leave with me. Just said, "Feel better, babe," and turned back to the conversation before I even reached the door. Outside, the air was cold and wet. I stood there on the curb for a while, pretending to check my phone. Just watching the restaurant window, wondering if she'd look out. If she'd notice I was gone. If she'd chase after me. She didn't. When I got home, I took off my shoes in the dark and sat in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the fridge. My phone buzzed once, a text from her. Let me know if you need anything. I might stay out a bit longer. A few of us are grabbing another drink. Don't wait up. Same exact phrase she'd used the night I saw her with him at the cafe. Copy. Paste. Repeat. But I wasn't the same anymore. Because now, I had something I hadn't had before. A name. A face. A time. And a plan. The morning after that dinner, I woke up before her. Not intentionally. I just couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying the dinner in high definition, looping through the way Ezra said her name. The way she laughed before glancing at me like she'd been caught doing something wrong, but refused to apologize for it. She was still asleep when I left the bedroom, one hand curled under the pillow, her phone resting on the nightstand beside her face. It was charging, face down, silent. But I noticed a small red dot on the corner of the screen, the voice memo app. I didn't touch it then. I just stared at it. That dot sat there like a splinter in my brain all morning. Later that day, when she went out to pick up groceries, I caved. I knew the passcode. Not because she told me, but because she forgot one night that mirrored surfaces reflect numbers. The phone unlocked, and there it was, 3 new recordings, all within the past week. Each about 6 to 8 minutes long. They were all named things like Brainstorm 1 or Meeting Notes. My chest tightened. I clicked the first one. Her voice filled the room. Calm, confident, slightly tired. The way she sounded when she rehearsed client pitches. But the background wasn't an office. It was too quiet, too echoey, like an apartment or a hotel room. Halfway through, I heard another voice, Male, warm, low. Ezra. My stomach dropped. You're recording? He said. She laughed. Don't worry, I'll delete it later. I just don't want to forget what we came up with. What we came up with, he repeated, teasing. Yes, Ezra, she said, her tone softening in a way that made my skin crawl. What we came up with. And then, silence. Muffled sounds. Maybe movement. I stopped the recording before it could confirm what I already knew. My hands were shaking. I deleted nothing. I just sat there, staring at her contact photo on the screen. One I took years ago when we went hiking, before either of us had learned how to hide from each other. When she came home, I couldn't look at her. I think she noticed. She asked if something was wrong. I said I was fine. She pressed a hand to my shoulder, warm and familiar, and said, You look tired, babe. Maybe you're working too much. Her tone was careful, sweet but rehearsed, like a nurse consoling a patient who doesn't realize he's terminal. That night, I left my own phone recording while we had dinner. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to catch. Maybe a name whispered into her messages, maybe a slip-up in her voice. Instead, what I got was worse. Around midnight, while pretending to sleep, I heard the faint sound of her phone lighting up again. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched as she lifted it, unlocked it, and listened. She was replaying one of those voice memos, smiling at the dark. The next morning, I confronted her without saying I had evidence. I just asked, Do you ever get the feeling that something's missing between us? She paused for a long time before answering, not because she was thinking, but because she was crafting. Maybe, she said finally, brushing hair out of her eyes. I think we just need space. You've been intense lately. Intense, she said, as if love was a bad habit I couldn't quit, as if noticing her distance was something I should be ashamed of. After that, she started forgetting small things. My favorite meals, my deadlines, my birthday plans. She called me Mark once. I didn't ask who Mark was. I just nodded like it was normal. Each accident chipped away at something invisible, like she was erasing me piece by piece, one memory at a time, until I was just another person she used to know. That's when I realized what her fake forgetting really was, not carelessness. It was control. Every time she forgot, I'd fill in the blanks. I'd remind her. I'd do the emotional heavy lifting. And she'd watch me, eyes soft with pity, like I was the one drifting away. But then came the final slip. 2 days later, she left her laptop open while taking a shower. Calendar app still up. One of her reminders flashed across the screen. Pick up key from Ezra. Not a key. Not for work. Just the key. And when I clicked on it, there was a note attached, a message she must have written to herself weeks ago. Make sure he doesn't suspect. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just lay there next to her, counting the seconds between her breaths, wondering how long she'd been rehearsing this version of her life. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was curious. Because if she was building a secret life, I was going to see what it looked like from the inside. The key had weight to it. Real metallic weight. I'd kept it in a drawer for weeks, half afraid to test it, half terrified not to. Every time Dana left the house, I'd take it out and just hold it in my hand, feeling the edges press into my skin. I imagined what kind of lock it belonged to, what kind of place she used it for. At night, when she was asleep beside me, I'd picture her walking down some hallway I'd never seen, unlocking a door that led to a version of her life where I didn't exist. On a cold Saturday morning, I decided to stop imagining. She said she was meeting a friend for brunch, but I already knew she wasn't. I watched her order the ride from the window, same driver as before. When she left, I waited 10 minutes, then took the key, my jacket, and the ache that had replaced my heart, and drove across the city to the building I'd seen her enter weeks ago. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too clean. Rows of identical new apartments, glass and steel, each one pretending to be private. I parked half a block away and walked, feeling every heartbeat echo in my ears. When I reached the door, I almost turned back, but curiosity and pain have a way of blending until they feel like courage. The key fit, smoothly, perfectly. The hallway inside smelled faintly of paint and air freshener. I counted the doors, 102, 104, 106, until I reached 108. The lock was the same style. My pulse jumped. I lifted the key again, bracing for whatever waited on the other side. But before I could even touch it, the door opened. A man stood there. Not Ezra. Someone else. Late 30s maybe, hair a mess, face pale like he hadn't seen the sun in days. He looked surprised, but not shocked, as if he'd been expecting someone, just not me. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice careful. I froze. My brain split in two, one side screaming to run, the other whispering you came this far. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think I have the wrong place." He studied me for a second too long. "You're Lester, right?" The sound of my own name hit harder than it should have. "Yeah," I said, though my mouth had gone dry. "How do you?" "She told me you might come." Those words twisted something inside me. Every nerve fired at once. "She told you." He nodded. "She said you might start looking, that you'd find the key eventually." I didn't know what to say. I stepped closer, peering past him. The apartment behind him looked half lived in. A couch, 2 mugs on the table, a few boxes stacked near the wall. No sign of Dana. No sign of Ezra either. "She's not here," he said, as if reading my mind. "Hasn't been for weeks." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Then whose place is this?" He hesitated. "Ours," he said finally. "Well, it was supposed to be." The words hit harder than any confession could. He didn't sound triumphant or smug. He sounded defeated, like someone who'd already lost something I hadn't even realized was gone. "I don't understand," I said. "She said she needed time," he continued quietly. "That she wasn't ready to leave you yet. That she just needed somewhere to think." I thought I was helping. I didn't know she'd. He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I shouldn't even be telling you this." My chest felt hollow. "You're saying you were together?" "For a while, yeah," he said, almost apologetic. "But she left. No warning. No call. Just stopped coming. You're not the only one she disappeared on." He stepped back, letting me look into the apartment again. There were still traces of her. A scarf on the back of a chair, a pair of shoes by the door. Proof that she'd been there, built something here, then abandoned it like she'd outgrown the lie. I stood there for a long time, the silence stretching between us. The stranger finally asked, "Do you want to come in?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just needed to know." When I stepped back outside, the sunlight hit my eyes like punishment. I got in my car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. For the first time, I realized the story I'd been telling myself, the one where she was in control, where I was the victim, wasn't the whole truth. Dana wasn't just hiding from me. She was running from everyone. That night, she came home at her usual time, calm as ever. She kissed me on the cheek and asked about dinner like nothing had changed. I watched her move around the kitchen, humming softly, and wondered how many other lives she'd built while pretending to live mine. She caught me staring and smiled. "What?" she asked, playful like old times. "Nothing," I said. "Just trying to remember something." And maybe I was, trying to remember who she used to be. Or maybe, finally, trying to remember who I was before I forgot myself loving her. The first photo was hidden inside a zip folder named invoices_2022_final. It was on her old hard drive, the one she asked me to help back up when her laptop started acting up. We were sitting in the living room at the time, half watching a true crime documentary she insisted we'd already seen. I didn't remember it. Maybe she had watched it with someone else. She handed me the drive and went to make tea. "Just copy everything," she said. "Don't overthink it." I smiled. I always overthought it. It wasn't even labeled suspiciously. I clicked the folder by accident, meaning to skip past it. Inside were the usual spreadsheets and receipts, dry, boring stuff. And then one image file. Just one. It opened full screen. Her, standing on a balcony I didn't recognize, wearing a blue sundress I'd never seen. Hair pinned up, sun in her eyes. She looked peaceful, almost ethereal. And someone had taken that photo from a close distance, too close to be casual. It wasn't a selfie. It wasn't a tripod. It was someone looking at her like they knew her body before the picture and after it too. I minimized it the second she walked back in the room, heart thudding like I'd been caught trespassing in her inner world. She sat beside me with 2 mugs, unaware of the silent explosion that had just gone off between us. I said nothing, saved everything, moved it to a private drive, pretended I had no idea. That night, I scoured every folder. Not obsessively, methodically. I approached it like an editor searching for inconsistencies in a draft. And the inconsistencies were everywhere. Dozens of photo fragments with dates that didn't match where she said she was. Files modified at 3 a.m. when she was supposedly asleep next to me. Notes to herself titled things like reset_plan_draft and talking points if he asks. But the worst came from an audio recording saved in a folder marked scrap_ideas. She was talking to herself. At first, I thought it was some sort of journal. But it wasn't therapeutic. It was preparatory. He's going to ask eventually. He's not stupid. But he also doesn't want the truth. He just wants me to say something that makes him feel like the good guy. There was a pause. A long, dead pause. Then she sighed. If I tell him I was unhappy, he'll think it's his fault. If I tell him I was confused, he'll say we should fix it. But I'm not confused. I just stopped wanting to be someone's story. I wanted to write my own. That line hit me like ice water down the back. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't even about Ezra anymore. It was about me, the idea of me, the version of me she had outgrown but didn't have the courage to leave. I sat there listening to her voice confess everything she refused to say out loud, realizing she had already rehearsed the conversation we hadn't had. And I knew then, Dana wasn't lying to me. Not really. She was lying to herself, crafting a story where she was the protagonist, the dreamer, the brave one, where everyone else, including me, was just a quiet bystander in the background of her awakening. I started noticing the layers she'd built. Her social media presence had shifted too, subtle but precise. New friends, curated captions, tags removed from old posts of us. It was like watching a public rebrand in real time. A Dana 2.0, and I wasn't invited to the beta test. But instead of confronting her that night, I did something else. I printed the photo, the one on the balcony, and pinned it inside my closet door. Not to punish myself, but to remember. Not her. Not even the betrayal. But the moment I realized I didn't recognize the woman I had built a life around, I started keeping a journal too. Not digital. Paper. Hidden beneath my socks. I wrote everything. Not for her. Not to use against her. Just to hear myself think without her voice in my head. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped having thoughts that didn't include how she'd react to them. And one night, in the middle of writing, I wrote a sentence that made my hand freeze mid-letter. She didn't leave me. I just never asked her to stay. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was true, but deeply afraid that it might be. The next day, she was gone when I woke up. No note. No text. Nothing on the calendar. Just an empty mug in the sink and a faint trace of perfume near the door. I didn't know where she went, but I also didn't ask. I sat on the edge of the bed for an hour, staring at the same spot on the floor, until I realized I hadn't cried once. Whatever this was, it wasn't grief anymore. It was something quieter, something final. She came home 2 days later like nothing happened. No dramatic reveal, no tears. Just walked in holding groceries and humming a tune she never finished. I watched her move around the kitchen, put milk in the fridge, check her phone, and complain about how expensive oranges had gotten. The absurd normalcy of it almost made me laugh. That night, we didn't fight. We didn't talk about it at all. I think she expected me to either scream or collapse. She was ready for chaos. What she wasn't ready for, what she'd never expected, was my silence. The next morning, I made coffee for both of us. French press, the way she used to like it before everything got complicated. I placed her cup on the table with a folded piece of paper beside it, a letter I'd rewritten 6 times over the last week. She walked into the kitchen wrapped in her robe, saw the coffee, saw the paper, and froze. "What's this?" she asked. "Just read it," I said, grabbing my coat. She didn't open it right away. She just stood there while I zipped up, eyes scanning me like she was trying to figure out what version of me had shown up today. I didn't wait for her to read it. I walked out the door. The letter wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was honest, maybe for the first time in our whole marriage. I told her I knew about Ezra, about the apartment, about the voice memos, the fake forgetting, the second life she was rehearsing in whispers and rehearsed glances. But more importantly, I told her I forgave her. Not because what she did was okay, it wasn't, but because I refused to carry the version of myself she made me become. The one who doubted, bent, waited. The man who folded himself smaller each time she expanded in a direction he wasn't allowed to follow. I told her I wasn't staying, but I wasn't running either. I had already packed my things, not just clothes, but the old parts of myself I used to love. My books, my sketch pads, my fountain pens, the things that made me Lester before I became her husband. I'd signed a lease 2 towns over in a small apartment with wood floors and a slanted window that let the sun in just right during the mornings. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Entirely mine. When I arrived at the new place, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't open the bottle of whiskey I'd brought in case I wanted to drown the day. Instead, I made tea, sat on the floor, and wrote. Not about her. Not about pain. But about a man who finally chose himself. Not because he was bitter, but because he realized his story didn't end with someone else's exit. It began with his own return. Weeks passed. She didn't reach out. I think she knew better. Or maybe she simply moved on. After all, people like Dana rarely look back. They only reinvent. And that's fine. That's her journey. But mine? Mine became unexpectedly beautiful. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. Took a design job at a local publishing house that didn't pay much, but made me feel creative again. Even started sketching on weekends. Nothing fancy, just street corners, coffee mugs, strangers on trains. Life started to feel full, but not overwhelming. Quiet, but not empty. And one day, in the middle of a rainy afternoon, I walked into a bookstore downtown and met someone. Not someone better, just someone kind. Someone who asked what I was reading and actually cared about the answer. We talked about books and fonts and how everyone pretends to understand wine, but no one really does. And for the first time in years, I laughed, really laughed, without wondering who might be watching. I don't know where that part of the story is going yet. And I'm okay with that. What I do know is this. She thought I'd fall apart. But I didn't. I fell back together.